Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. Those persons not entitled to the privilege of the floor will please retire to the gallery. Senators and all in attendance will please stand and be led in prayer by the Reverend Gene Pupke, First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond, Virginia. Following the prayer, all will please remain standing and be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America by Tara H. Perkinson, Chief Deputy Clerk, Senate Clerk's Office.
God, known by many names, hear our call unto you. For this day we bring forward an agreement. In gratitude, we raise our voices, for we are still the people who have endured. We have persevered. We are among the longest, and our democracy is strong, and for this we are grateful. We are grateful for the army of healthcare workers, the hospitals, public clinics, and healthcare that is working to save lives, heal lives, and keep us safe in a time of scourge. We pray for the citizens who have died. We have lost many, and those who suffer from the disease in an ongoing way are with us. We pray for a recovery and a return to health and safety. Guide us and teach us how to reflect your wisdom and compassion, even through our differences. We ask a blessing upon the citizens of this fine Commonwealth and upon its governmental leaders who here stand before you humbly and struggling and working hard to find collaborative points, to serve the greater good, and to offer honest compromise. Holy One, if it's not too irreverent, bless this budget, because it represents hours and days of our lives. And we hope in it we can win true respect and secure the public good and come together for the future of this Commonwealth, which should always be our highest good. But this we do serving you, and in your name we bless all who come forward to speak and to share their opinion. And we also are grateful for the institution of the Senate of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Amen, Amen, blessed be, Ashe.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Attendants will please record their vote aye. Clerk will close the roll.
You have a quorum, Mr. President. Senate Journal for Friday, August 6, 2021.
Senator from Hampton, Senator Locke moves that the reading of the journal be waived. All in favor of waiving the reading of the journal will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 32, noes 6.
Ayes 32, noes 6. The reading of the journal is waived. The clerk will report any communication from the House of Delegates.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The clerk will report any communication from the governor.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now comes the time in the morning hour where we recognize special guests who have joined us here in the gallery. And I would remind everyone that the way this will proceed is a senator will stand up and recognize an individual or group. I will then offer the warm welcome of the Senate, and we will then all applaud at the end together. Do any senators wish to be recognized? The senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Hoshby.
Good morning, Mr. President. I rise for a purpose of introduction.
Morning, Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to introduce the Reverend Gene Pupke from the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond, who just gave our morning benediction. And I want to thank the Reverend for being with us here today. The First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond is well known for its generous hospitality for everyone who walks through its doors. It is welcoming and embraces all people of different faiths. And I personally want to thank the Reverend for all of the work that she and her congregation do for our community in Richmond. Mr. President, I ask that we offer the warm welcome of the Senate to the Reverend Gene Pupke.
Thank the Senator. Our friend, the Reverend Gene Pupke, already standing in the gallery. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Thank you for that gorgeous prayer and for your tremendous, wonderful leadership. We are so grateful to you for everything that you do in our community, throughout our Commonwealth. You lift us all up, and we are deeply appreciative of the work that you always do. I would ask everyone to please join me in extending the warmest welcome of the Senate to our friend, the Reverend Gene Pupke. Senator from Washington, Senator Pillion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to request for leave of absence from my seatmate, the Senator from Henrico, who is away on pressing personal business.
Thank the Senator. The Journal will so reflect. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? The Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Stanislaw.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend the rules of the Senate and grant the privileges of the floor to a very special guest.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the privileges of the floor be granted to distinguished persons? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 38, no 0.
Ayes 38, no 0. The rules are suspended and the privileges of the floor are granted to our distinguished guests. Chair recognizes the Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Surville, for the purpose of presenting our distinguished guests.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, with us today, we have some members of the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard. And before we read the resolution, I just want to note a couple things. Number one, back on January the 6th of this year, the United States Capitol came under siege for the first time since the War of 1812 and 1814, when the British burned it under General Cockburn. Once it became apparent that there was no ordinary protest in play, the call went out for reinforcements, and the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police responded, and so did some others. Many officers feared for their life, including my constituent, who we commended last week, Michael Fanoni, who ended up being beaten, mauled, ended up being released after he noted he had children, and many others. Eventually, after the building had fallen, Virginia answered the call. The Virginia State Police sent over 200 police officers over the 14th Street Bridge, and if you haven't had a chance to watch the video of that, I would encourage you to do so, of seeing Virginia, our officers there, drive by the Jefferson Memorial, another great Virginian who helped found our country, George Washington, and they ended up going right into the melee and turning the tide. Subsequent to that, the Virginia National Guard likewise responded and helped maintain order of the Capitol for the ensuing weeks. Today, with us, we have today Colonel, to my right, Colonel Gary Settle, who leads our Virginia State Police. He's also brought with him, in order to my right, Lieutenant Neil Johnson, Sergeant Allison Hoy, Trooper Armando Santiago, Trooper Donovan Johnson, and Trooper Michael McSellers. To my left, we We have the Acting Secretary of Veteran and Defense Affairs, Kathleen Jabs, the Assistant Secretary, Jonathan Ward. We also have Major General Timothy Williams, who's the Adjutant General of our National Guard. And I just want to note to everybody that on that day, 138 police officers were injured, 73 Capitol Police, 65 Metropolitan Police, 15 officers ended up being hospitalized. Senator Barker's constituent, Brian Sicknick, ended up passing away from a stroke the following day. And subsequent to that action, 4 police officers defending the Capitol ended up taking their own lives, 5 officers total. My constituent, Metropolitan Police Officer Jeffrey Smith, was one of those just recently. Senator Barker's constituent, Metropolitan Police Officer Kyle DeFreitag, Senator McPike's constituent, who we adjourned in memory of last week, Metropolitan Officer Gunther Hashida, and also Capitol Police Officer Howard Liebengood. But Mr. President, these officers, the National Guard, they put their lives on the line for us every day. And not only for us here in Virginia, but they also now help protect our country. And as Virginia played a leading role in the founding of America and played a leading role in many of the things we try to do as a country, this time they defended our United States Capitol and put themselves right in the middle of it and right at risk. And in light of that, they all deserve our congratulations and commendation. And I would ask, I guess, the resolution be read.
Senate Resolution number 506, commending the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard. Whereas beginning on January the 6th, 2021, members of the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard from throughout the Commonwealth mobilized and responded to the attack and insurrection at the United States Capitol building. And whereas prior to the counting of Electoral College vote by a joint session of the United States Congress, the Virginia State Police coordinated with other law enforcement agencies to monitor intelligence reports and address potential threats. And whereas on the day of the count, the Virginia State Police prepared 71 troopers from the Division 7 Fairfax office to respond to any immediate incidents in Fairfax County or Northern Virginia, while the Division 2 Culpeper office placed a quick reaction platoon of an additional 60 troopers on call in the event of an emergency. And whereas at approximately 2:20 p.m., the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia, acting on behalf of the United States Capitol Police, requested assistance, and the Virginia State Police relocated the troopers from the Fairfax office to Arlington County to wait further instructions. And whereas law enforcement officers at the United States Capitol estimated that there were 75,000 attendees for the Stop the Steal rally around the building, and as the count continued, members of the rally turned into a violent insurrection and broke through barricades, with hundreds of individuals ultimately breaching doors and windows to enter the building and storm congressional offices and chambers. And whereas after the Virginia State Police received a formal request for 200 troopers, the platoon from the Fairfax Division immediately deployed to the United States Capitol grounds, followed by the platoon from the Culpeper Division. An additional 100 troopers from the Richmond and Chesapeake divisions were activated and responded promptly with no forewarning. And whereas the troopers from Fairfax, equipped with civil disturbance gear, were led through underground passageways to the lower West Terrace, where insurrectionists, many of whom were armed, were attempting to breach the doors to the United States Capitol building. And whereas members of the Virginia State Police, the United States Capitol Police, and the Metropolitan Police Department courageously engaged the insurrectionists, clearing the first level of the inauguration stage in the face of extreme violence and aggression. And whereas members of the Virginia State Police and the other law enforcement agencies maintained the initiative and pushed the insurrectionists down to the second level of the inauguration stage and away from the United States Capitol. And whereas the members of the Virginia State Police were met with extreme aggression and violence, which necessitated the deployment of various types of crowd-controlled munitions to gain control of the chaotic situation. And whereas the members of the Virginia State Police continued to engage the insurrectionists with other law enforcement agencies by pushing them into the street and removing them from the overall grounds of the United States Capitol. And whereas the Virginia State Police observed numerous insurrectionists carrying loaded firearm magazines, knives, axes, fire extinguishers, sledgehammers, and pickaxes, and similar items were later found on the floors inside and outside of the United States Capitol and its grounds. And whereas Senior Trooper Kenneth Terry prevented a serious injury to a Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police officer whose uniform caught fire as a result of a flammable canister being thrown at the officer by deploying a coal fire extinguisher to put out the fire. And whereas Senior Trooper Medic Christopher Gezik was one of the first medics who rendered aid to the United States Capitol Police officer, and fellow Virginian Brian Sicknick, who collapsed and later died due to injuries he sustained during the insurrection. And whereas after the engagement, the Virginia State Police established a defensive perimeter at the west entrance to the United States Capitol building, no Virginia State troopers were injured while retaking the building. And whereas executive and command staff of the Virginia State Police established an incident command center at the Area 45 Arlington office, and troopers from the Fairfax, Culpeper, Richmond, Chesapeake, Appomattox, and Salem divisions helped provide 24-hour security until January 8, 2021, when complete control of the Capitol grounds was restored. And whereas in response to a request for assistance from Mayor Muriel Bowser, Governor Ralph Northam also authorized the Virginia National Guard to deploy to Washington, D.C., and whereas on January 7th, the Virginia National Guard quickly mustered personnel, many of whom unexpectedly had to leave their families and full-time jobs, and departed for Washington, D.C. to provide security at the United States Capitol. Approximately 2,000 Virginia National Guard personnel had deployed to the area by the following weekend. And whereas Virginia National Guard personnel integrated with the local law enforcement security plan to protect property and safeguard local residents and government officials, remaining on duty through the presidential inauguration on January 20th. And whereas in addition to the deployment to Washington, D.C., the Virginia National Guard has also played a critical role in the Commonwealth's response to the COVID-19 pandemic during 2020 and 2021 by distributing personal protective equipment to frontline workers and assisting the Virginia Department of Health with the planning, logistics, and administration of COVID-19 tests and vaccinations. And whereas the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard ably served the Commonwealth and the nation and responded to an extraordinary situation with the utmost distinction, demonstrating courage, composure, fortitude, and a strong commitment to safeguarding the founding ideals and institutions of the United States. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of Virginia that the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard hereby be commended for their performance above and beyond their duties during and after the insurrection on January 6, 2021, to defend the seat of government of the United States of America and restore order at the United States Capitol building. And be it resolved further that the Clerk of the Senate prepare copies of this resolution for presentation to the Virginia State Police and the Virginia National Guard as an expression of the Senate of Virginia's admiration for their professionalism during this unprecedented incident.
Secretaries.
They're coming by.
Please come on. Great job, Scott. Thanks. Get him. Please, come on out. Thanks, John. Great. First, we would all like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude and appreciation to each member of the Virginia National Guard, the Virginia State Police, for your heroism, for your commitment every single day to protecting the lives and the safety of all of us here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And today, of course, we do so with particular gratitude for your extraordinary heroism under circumstances that none of us really likely could have imagined. We know that you're called upon to do some pretty amazing things under circumstances that for the average person would be difficult, but for you all, you make it look as though you train your entire lives to do it. And we could not be more grateful that it happened at this moment. What you did in going to the Capitol while also maintaining your guard here in Virginia is something that will reverberate throughout history. It will be an example of true leadership, grace, and fire under pressure. And the fact that each one of you, till this day, continues to uphold that very high standard is something that we will always be proud of here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so, Colonel Settle, to Major Williams, to our secretaries, to our extraordinary troopers, to our lieutenant, and to everyone who has taken this opportunity to be here to honor these extraordinary heroes, we thank you. And on behalf of the Senate of Virginia and the General Assembly, we give you our deepest gratitude. And I would ask everyone to please join me in extending a hearty congratulations and our heartfelt gratitude to these heroes. Thank you all very much. And with that, the Senate will be at ease. Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. Recess. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Sasslaw.
Mr. President, I would move now that we temporarily recess in order for the Senate Finance staff to come here and make a presentation on the budget conference.
Senator. Thank the Senator. Without objection, the Senate will stand in recess.
As I'm sure you know, in the last 3 days, we did complete the Budget Conference Committee and put forward a report for you. I want first to thank our Senate Finance and Appropriations staff for all the work they have done on helping us reach this agreement, but also all the work they did in coming up with our Senate version of the budget as well. It's been a most unusual time, and they have risen to the task. We have approximately 10 significant amendments that are part of this conference report. They will go over each of them, and I would request that if you have a question about one of them, you ask it you ask to be recognized. I'll recognize you, and you ask it when that particular item is up. So, April.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to move through this very quickly because, as Senator House said, there's only a few items to do that are dramatically different than what would have come over in the introduced. Looking at the slides, slide 3 and 4 are just a reminder of the various federal funding and the ARPA funding that came over. Slide 5 is just a reminder of the main pots of money that we've been talking about as you've been here have been the Virginia allocation under the Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds, which is about $4.3 billion, and the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund, which is about $221.7 million. Turning to slide 6, just a reminder, now we're dealing with the House bill, but the introduced and plus these amendments, House Bill 7007, again, just appropriates multiple ARPA funding streams related to Virginia's allocations that have been received. The bill appropriates our plans for the allocation now of almost $3.2 billion. So instead of 3.1, it rounds up to 3.2 now of the nearly $4.3 billion that Virginia received under that portion of the ARPA funding. It does contain still a number of language items, and it does not appropriate or take into consideration any general fund dollars. Moving to slide 7, the first change, and this was not in the Senate version of the bill, but this first one has to do with clarifying language under the grants for victims of sexual and domestic violence. There's just clarifying language to make sure that the grants are fully restored.
Are there any questions on this item? Okay, April.
Moving to the next item. There's an additional $2.5 million for the Department of Criminal Justice Services to provide funding for one-time competitive grants for community-based gun violence or youth and gang violence intervention programming. Priority is given to localities that have higher than average levels of gun violence, and that's in addition to the $2.5 million that's already under the Office of the Attorney General.
Are there questions on this item? Okay, April.
The next item is a one-time bonus for sheriffs, regional jails, and corrections. This provides a $3,000 one-time bonus for state-supported sworn officers of sheriff's departments and regional jails. And under the Department of Corrections, it provides the correction and law enforcement staff a one-time bonus of $3,000. This amendment also formalizes the agreement that was Senator Howe previously referenced by letter that she had sent to the governor, and the governor agreed to do a work group looking at further compensation for these groups, and that recommendation and report is due by October 15th of this year. And this is where the majority of the new spending falls. It's about.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is there a question on this item?
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougall.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, April, what is the difference between the Senate version as it left this body and the version that's in the conference report now? Is my understanding that our version was $5,000 over 3 years? Is that accurate? And this is $3,000 one time?
Madam Chair, Senator McDougall, you are correct. If you look on page 13, you'll see the item as it was in the Senate substitute for House Bill 7001 as it left this body, or the Senate amendments to the original Senate bill. That amendment was at a cost of almost $190 million and included a $5,000 one-time bonus in each of the 3 years versus this amendment.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, the next item is the amendment you might remember that passed on the Senate side that would extend the 6-month rate increase under Medicaid home and community-based services. That is in there. It extends that 12.5%. It does have some technical clarifying language to make sure there isn't a double count under personal care attendants, their rate increase, which was already taking place on January 1st.
Is there a question on this item? Okay, April.
Turning to page 8, the next item relates to the name, image, or likeness language related to institutions of higher education. This amendment is the same plus an addition as it was originally in the introduced budget. Under the Senate version and the substitute, it had been removed. It is in the conference report, but it adds the 2-year institutions, which include the Virginia Community College System and Richard Bland College, to the institutions that are covered under the name, image, and likeness language.
Are there any questions on this item? Okay, April.
Madam Chair, the next item is related to the Overtime Wage Act. This language is different, slightly different than the introduced budget. It does maintain, however, the exemptions for public sector workers for comp time in lieu of overtime pay, and also the maximum work hour exemptions for certain private sector employees. In addition, it exempts volunteers within public sector entities such as coaches who volunteer their time and get paid a stipend, and it also makes a technical correction that was discovered related to the Overtime Wage Act.
Are there any questions on this one? Okay.
All right. The last amendment in the conference report relates to the reopening of the Department of Motor Vehicles. The language requires the department to come up with a detailed operating plan that would help serve the walk-in customers, and that must be done in addition to the appointment system within 30 days. 30 days beyond that, those provision of the walk-in services consistent with that plan must be done, and that's the 30 days plus the additional 30 days is upon the effective date of the bill.
Questions? Goodness. Okay.
Madam Chair, I will just point out a few other items. On slide 9, you'll see updated numbers for the new totals with the bill. At the top, the new over $9 billion, almost $9.1 billion, and then in the middle on the italicized amounts, the almost $2 billion there that I referenced earlier. Slide 10, you'll just see it gives you an accounting again of where the enactments are in the Act, but it renumbers those, as does the conference report. And then lastly, on slide 11, you'll see the updated spending, which includes what we spent under the almost $4.3 billion, which was about $3.2, plus the $221 of the capital funds. That equals the $3.4 billion there in the first column, and then you'll see the next biennium amount. What's planned but not appropriated is almost $354 million, and then the total. If you flip to the appendix and you're curious as to what was in the Senate version of the amendments or the substitute to House Bill 7001 as it left this body, you'll see all of the items that were there. 5 of these, or 50%, were adopted. The ones that weren't adopted had to do with the remote work data collection, technical amendments for the Alexandria CSO, and the evictions. Items that are separate and severable, and the voter precinct one between slides 13 and 14. And again, for those of you who wanted some of the other background material, it's there in the appendix. Madam Chair, that completes the presentation.
Thank you. Has anyone thought of a question in the meantime? Okay, seeing none, I do want us all to please thank the Senate Finance and Appropriations staff. They have been doing yeoman and very unexpected service for months now, and I believe have answered every question we've had and considered every suggestion from everyone. So thank you so much.
Senate will come to order. Senators will please take their seats. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I would now move that the Senate stand in recess until 1:30 Eastern Daylight Time.
Thank the senator. Without objection, the Senate will stand in recess until 1:30 p.m. The Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. Senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to introduce a memorial resolution for Miss Mary Woodruff, a famous Amherst resident who passed away recently, made pies for senators, congressmen, and other notables for 104 years of her life.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the Senate grant unanimous consent to introduce a memorial resolution? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The consent of the Senate is granted to introduce the memorial resolution. Thank you. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the clerk will call the calendar.
Senate calendar for Monday, August the 9th, 2021. Bill in conference. Conference report on House Bill 7001.
Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adopt the conference committee report, and speaking briefly to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank the conferees for their work on this compromise. They were prepared to stay till hell froze over to defend the Senate position, but fortunately it didn't come to that. We were able rather quickly to come to some agreements. Last time that we were here on the Senate floor, the minority leader, Senator Norman, the senator from James City County, expressed concern that we would simply fold and accept the House and the governor's position. I assured him that we would represent the Senate version and that we would fight for it. I hope that all senators will agree we did just that. As you look at the conference report, you will see that on several items our position is affirmed, and on others we were able to compromise. He also, I think this was privately, not on the floor, expressed the concern that there would not be time for members of the Senate to consider the conference committee report. And at that time, I assured him there would be at least 24 hours, and if there wasn't, I would vote against the report myself. Well, we have given you about 60 hours to consider it. As you all know, and I've said repeatedly, the pandemic has been challenging. However, I'm still proud of the way that we have come together to come up with a plan to direct the ARPA funding to the people of the Commonwealth. This conference report represents some compromises, but it does contain the requests that are important to the entire Senate. Funding for items such as broadband, the Unemployment Trust Fund, water and infrastructure, tourism and business support, and education at all levels. It also provides much-needed support in the area of mental health and additional compensation for our workforce where the pandemic is exacerbating our ability to hire and retain needed employees. This budget process has been efficient in order for us to assure that the ARPA funds would go out where it is needed as quickly as possible. We all know people who are suffering, and we all know many of our constituents are suffering, and time is of the essence. However, we have left funding that is either unallocated or planned for the next biennium of over $1 billion to buffer us against any uncertainties, including those related to the ongoing pandemic. It is my hope that you will support the conference report today because it provides additional but much needed relief for individuals and businesses. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. What purpose is Senator from Tazewell, Senator Hackworth rise?
Mr. President, I would like to speak to the conference report, please.
Senator's floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to also echo the sentiments of the Conference Committee, and thank you for keeping some of my amendment in there, although I was very disappointed to find out just in the past few minutes that the local funded deputies got taken out. I think every senator here that has deputies in their district will get complaints because now you are in a position to have to fully fund those local funded deputies in your locality and or not receive those funds. So I'm disappointed in that. And I yield the floor.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Roanoke County? Senator Suderline, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak to the conference report.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was listening about how strong the Senate positions prevailed, or the defense that was offered for them at least. But looking at this conference report, I see that there's a new anti-gun violence appropriation that wasn't in the Senate or the House bill, so it looks like the administration prevailed in that sense. The governor's attempt to legislate a whole new concept regarding college athletes, which you, Mr. President, deemed was not properly before us, and which on a strong bipartisan vote we sustained your ruling. I see that's back before us. The senator from Tazewell just spoke briefly to his amendment. It seems that more than 80% of that's gone, so I guess we might have prevailed by less than a fifth of that position. The senator from Southern Fairfax's amendment protecting small landlords, I was not able to find that in there. It looks like we're now going to treat everyone that has a single unit the same way we treat large property owning companies, which is usually not the way we do it in real estate law here in the Commonwealth. We usually almost always have a 4-unit rule because that's able to affect the market, has been the determination. But it appears that the Senate position on that did not hold. My bipartisan amendment to count the absentee ballots by precinct instead of large absentee pools, which I care a lot about, and those of us that are trying to strengthen confidence in election results from bad actors, that Senate position seems not to have prevailed. I can't seem to find where the Senate positions prevailed in their entirety. I see that on some, we won I guess, partial victory on DMV, although it looks like not even our position there. It looks like 30 days from now we'll then find out what 30 days from then we'll do. So I congratulate the senator from Fairfax City for perhaps one of the only ones I can find. I was not in a position where I could vote to give this governor a $1 billion blank check. I know some people think that's fine. I don't think it's a wise decision for a legislature to hand over its number one power and responsibility, which is appropriating money, to the governor like that. But I at least hoped that the Senate positions would prevail a lot more often than they did here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. What purpose, senator from James City County? Senator Norman, rise.
Mr. President, probably one of the more eloquent introductions that I've done. Mr. President, before I editorialize on the budget, following up on a point that was previously made, Mr. President, you had ruled that NIL provision was not appropriately before the body, but it is incorporated in the conference committee report. And my inquiry of you, Mr. President, is that matter appropriately before the Senate?
The Senate will stand at ease. Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. In response to the Senator from James City County's inquiry with regard to provision of the conference report, the chair rules that the matter is now properly before the Senate and that the conference report will be voted on an up or down basis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And recently you've been spot on. I'm just sorry you missed this one, sir. And I say that with good humor and respectful, sir. It is interesting. A couple of us that have been around for 3 or 4 years were exchanging frivolous comments, and I reminded them of how the Speaker of the House used to rule on the germaneness of Senate bills in an effort to frustrate us in addressing some of those issues. But having said that, Mr. President, addressing the motion on passage, please, sir.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, first of all, I would certainly compliment the Senate Finance staff who has done their predictable, thorough, and exhaustive preparation in guiding us, and we are blessed that they are so competent. There are a lot of good things in this bill, and there was a comment made that everyone had an opportunity to get something into the Senate bill. Mr. President, without being horribly disingenuous, I continue to view this bill as being a bill advocated by Governor Mercer and the Speaker of the House on it. And I will leave it at that, Mr. President. I'm concerned, again, about lines 972, which incorporate into the budget, which is not an appropriate place for it, that there are instances where remote meetings can continue to be held even in the absence of a gubernatorial emergency or pandemic situation. I think that is a very slippery slope that we are walking down. And of course, we spent the entire special sessions meeting in person while some were sitting on their porches or at the beaches on a boat participating remotely. And the importance of that is that it frustrates the ability of the general public and the professional institution community from actively participating in it. So I don't think that is a healthy thing. Mr. President, I would inquire of you, even though it is a conference report, can a motion be made to consider lines 988 through lines 1037 separate and severable?
Answer to the Senator's inquiry is no.
Excuse me, sir?
No.
I'm sorry, just didn't hear you. No.
I'm sorry, no.
All right, thank you, sir.
Sorry.
On it, Mr. President, I am going to be voting against this budget, and I already understand some consequences of it, but there are a lot of good things in it. I'm not impressed with the process. I'm not impressed with reference to remote voting. I'm not impressed with the NIL language, which has never, ever been considered by the General Assembly in enunciating a policy of this dimension because the Speaker of the University of Virginia wanted it. What about the other 13 public colleges and universities? A really, really bad precedent on that. And so I appreciate the work that the budget conferees did, but I regret that I'm unable to support it.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the junior Senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak against the conference committee report.
Senator, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I would also like to emphasize that there is a missing budget amendment that the constituents of Virginia feel very strongly about, and that's the $70 million budget amendment for a forensic audit here in Virginia. And I had delivered to my home last night over 4,000 notices from individual Virginians. They have signed all these forms. I have them here, and I'm turning them in to the Senate Clerk's office today for your review. These are Virginians. These are voters who feel like their voice was not heard. And we owe it to the people of Virginia to have a full audit so that we can restore voter confidence in our Virginia elections. So thank you very much, but I will not be able to support this budget. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to present this to the clerk.
For what purpose does the senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howell, rise?
I'm not sure, because of all of the stuff between us, that I properly heard the senator, but I believe she's proposing amendments to the conference report. Is that correct?
No. I think the senator was just referencing an amendment that she was proposing previously.
Oh,
I believe.
thank you.
I believe.
Because
For what purpose does the senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Rise to speak to the measure.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, despite being one half of the contrarian caucus, along with Senator Morrissey, I do plan to support this budget, and I want to thank the conferees for making some improvements to the original bill, both Republican and Democratic conferees. Just a couple things worth noticing. To me, one was, of course, the deputy sheriff bonus money. I think that's important. Really all over the state. We all have sheriffs and we all have deputy sheriffs. Two, the Overtime Wage Act. Not a lot of talk about this, but this was a significant amendment that we made where we match it up with the definitions in the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's something that's going to affect every single business in your district that has wage employees that work overtime, particularly if they do performance-based work. And third, reopening the Department of Motor Vehicles. I mean, that's an important step. I said it before, I'll say it again. The DMV is the agency by which the majority of state citizens interact with our state government, and having in-person service is something that I would not underestimate. Now, I'm not crazy with every portion of this conference report. I can think of at least one portion that's probably going to be headed to a courthouse real soon. But the bottom line is it is what's in front of us right now. So, again, I apologize for taking your time, but I do plan to support this, and I thank the conferees.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, to speak to the budget
proposal
here, the motion on the floor. I'm obviously strongly supportive of the motion on the floor. I think we need to adopt this, and I think that it was a good conference that was held with the House, and I think we did address a number of issues that were clearly important to the Senate in our deliberations there, and that we came out on in a very favorable position, I think, particularly relative to where the House had started, because they did not have any of the amendments, periods, and which means that they had none of the amendments that we proposed in the Senate, and that are in many instances incorporated in this final report, at least in part, if not in whole. I would also say that, just to address a couple of specific things, I had two budget amendments that were basically clarification that was necessary, was important to be able to address. Those were both removed from the final report, but those can be addressed again in this session when we come back in January. And in addition, we did get a response relative to the landlord issue and the tenant issues that indicated that the position that the Attorney General has pined on will be consistent with what we are attempting to do, and which we can clarify further if need be in January. So with that, I would urge the body to adopt this conference report.
Thank the senator. What purpose senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Inquiry of the clerk. In regards to R36, Rule 36 utilization, will all the previous noted Rule 36 be noted from the previous vote, or will each member have to? Or is this discussion, will it enable that recording in a journal?
We will record it in the journal just as we did for the budget bill itself.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Further follow-up, Mr. President?
Senator's the floor.
Speak to the conference report. I speak briefly only to correct my friend from James City County. Occasionally, I think we all get excited about issues, and specifically name, image, and likeness. Perhaps the gentleman is somewhat mistaken. In fact, this body has, in fact, considered name, image, and likeness. Senate Bill 464 in 2020. House versions of the bill have been considered by the General Assembly, Mr. President. So just to set the record straight, occasionally we're never wrong, but sometimes mistaken. Thank you, Mr. President.
For what purpose, Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm speaking to the conference report.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind the body that in a bipartisan fashion, we all said that opening schools was the most important thing we could do as a community and as a state. So we could resume our activities, so we could, again, moms and dads could get back to work, so our children could catch up on their academic lessons and also the socialization that goes along with in-person learning. We all agreed that was incredibly important. And this conference report, well, this budget, and it remained, of course, in the conference report as well, there's $250 million allocated for HVAC grants that will go to school systems so they can upgrade their HVAC systems to ensure that children get a clean environment and also an environmentally sound environment, which will help us all enjoy maybe a reduction in carbon emissions. This is worth voting for. It absolutely is. Like any document, it is not perfect. We can't do perfect when we have 140 members working on something and putting our ideas forward. But this is as good as we could possibly get. And I don't think there's any reason to not move forward and give our children a clean environment for their schools, to provide mental health services. We have dollars in here for crisis intervention programs. We have gun violence prevention programs that was put in the conference report. This is worth voting for, and I do hope the body can get to that point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the question is, shall the Senate adopt the conference committee report? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 23, noes 16.
Ayes 23, no 16. The Senate adopts the conference committee report.
Commending resolution. Senate Resolution 766, commending Richard W. Harris.
Senator from Mecklenburg, Senator Ruff.
Mr. President, I move the resolution be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the resolution be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to. Okay. The Senate will be at ease. Seats. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslow.
Mr. President, I inquire the clerk, does that complete the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? For what purpose does the Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise?
Mr. President, by way of an announcement.
Senator, has the floor.
The Committee on the Judiciary plans to meet tomorrow, Tuesday, August the 10th, at 8 o'clock a.m. in Senate Room A to interview candidates for judicial offices. This will be the candidates for the Court of Appeals, Virginia, the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission, as well as other candidates for other judicial officers. Mr. President, I'd like to make an announcement now with regard to a press release that's been issued recently by the Virginia House and Senate Democrats on the Democratic Party's agreements on historic Court of Appeals nominees. I'm going to read them publicly for the first time. The first candidate, and I'm doing it alphabetically, will be Dominique A. Callens of Front Royal. The second is Doris Henderson Causey of Henrico. Vernita R. Cheney of Alexandria, Frank K. Friedman of Roanoke, Junius P. Fulton of Norfolk, Lisa M. Lorish of Charlottesville, Daniel E. Ortiz of Fairfax, and Stuart A. Raphael of Arlington. Mr. President, this has been just announced today that the Democrats have agreed that these would be the candidates for the Democratic Party. If you recall, last Thursday we had discussion concerning the rules of the Senate with regard to interviewing other candidates that senators would like to present. I've received, as of 5 o'clock on Saturday, 23 candidates for Court of Appeals. As I'll recall, that about nine of them were not interviewed by any statewide groups, bar groups. The rest of them were interviewed by statewide bar groups. And we will, as promised, entertain consideration of these candidates tomorrow. I would be remiss, however, if I did not note that the House of Delegates has no such rule, and the House of Delegates will not be interviewing any additional candidates for the Court of Appeals other than those that the House and the Senate Democratic caucuses have agreed to. So if anybody still wants to have one of their proposed nominees considered by the Judiciary Committee tomorrow, please let me and Shannon Hurd of Legislative Services know by 5 o'clock today if there are any candidates that still wish to be interviewed. Again, I would note that a candidate has to be voted on by both the House and the Senate, and the House has no intention of interviewing any such candidates. So, but however, if somebody still wants to do this, please let me know by 5 o'clock today, and also Shannon Hurd of Legislative Services to see if anybody wants to do this. So with that, Mr. President, I look forward to seeing anybody tomorrow at 8 o'clock tomorrow, August the 10th, at Senate Room A to interview candidates for judicial offices.
Mr. President.
Senator. What purpose Senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain, rise?
Would the senator from Roanoke City yield for a question or two?
Senator Yield.
Yield at least one at a time.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would ask, I appreciate the senator's suggestion that the Senate Courts of Justice Committee or Judiciary Committee is willing to extend an additional courtesy of interviewing additional candidates if they are requested to do so. But my question is, isn't that a fool's errand anyway, given the fact that the House has already announced that it does not intend to interview any additional candidates, therefore it will not be certifying any candidates, and any additional candidates that may be interviewed by the Senate Courts Committee will be ineligible for election to the bench?
Senator's floor.
Mr. President, the characterization of fool's errand is the senator's characterization, but I think the senator gets the point.
Right.
Further question?
Well, I thank the senator. Second question is...
Senator Yields. Senator from Roanoke City.
Yeah, I'll be happy to yield for another question.
Senator Yields, you have the floor.
Second question is, I know that the senator from Eastern Fairfax and others have pointed out that part of the reason for the delay in getting around to an agreement is the sheer volume of candidates that put their names forth, and the fact that the majority was relying upon the Virginia Bar Association to conduct interviews and to evaluate these candidates. My question to the senator from Roanoke City is, have each of these candidates listed on the Democrats' press release been interviewed and rated by the Virginia Bar Association, and did they all achieve highly qualified ratings? Two parts.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, they all were interviewed and rated by the Virginia State Bar, as we talked about earlier, and they're all interviewed too, I believe, by other bar associations as well.
Further question?
Well, yes, Mr. President.
Senator Yields. Senator Yields.
I'll be happy to yield.
Senator Yields, you have the floor. The second part of that question is, were they all rated as highly qualified by the Virginia State Bar?
Senator's floor.
Mr. President, it's a public record. I don't have them all in front of me, but the senator can check how they were rated by the different bars.
Mr. President, final question.
Senator Yield. Does the senator yield?
I'll be happy to yield.
Senator Yields, you have the floor.
That leads into my final question. The response to the former one is, will questionnaires and additional information, including the ratings for these candidates, be made available to the members of the Judiciary Committee before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Senator's floor.
Mr. President, I believe they're publicly available, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm talking about the Courts Committee questionnaires, typically, which are confidential and are provided to the members of the Courts Committees prior to the interviews, typically days prior to the interviews.
The floor.
Typically, Shannon Hurd of Legislative Services provides this information, and any member could look at that information. I don't have it personally, but Shannon Hurd, I'm sure, will cooperate and provide it to you. Some of these are confidential, of course.
Further question?
Mr. President, yes. Final question.
Will Senator yield?
I'll be happy to yield.
Senator Yields.
As long as necessary.
Has the chair given permission for dissemination of that information to all Courts Committee members?
Senator's the floor.
It's my understanding all members of the Senate Judiciary Committee can look at this information, even if it's confidential, and I'm sure Shannon Hurd will assist you.
I thank the gentleman.
Thank the senator. What purpose does the junior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for the point of a personal privilege.
Senator, it's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a sitting senator, out of respect for the people who elected me to serve them, I cannot sit idle while my colleagues from across the aisle ham-handedly nominate and appoint judges for all the people without allowing Republicans any true, real opportunity to participate in the process. This has become a one-party socialist movement by our colleagues on the other side. Virginia is the mother of American liberty, the liberty that granted all 40 of us in this chamber the opportunity to serve the great people of Virginia. Because of this, I am saddened and disappointed as we are told to watch as the leftist destructive socialist agendas rip at the very fabric that binds us all together as a state and as a nation. While I want everyone's grievances to be heard and addressed, I will not sit and watch as our history is rewritten and our institutions are violated, even here in the Senate of Virginia. The left tears down statues, destroys businesses, and assaults our history. We, as a nation, should learn from our past, correct our mistakes, and come together as one people. We began this session with a prayer followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, facing our flag, a flag stitched together by our shared history and displayed as a symbol of hope that as imperfect people, we can strive to build a better home for all Americans. Mr. President, I serve the people of my district in Virginia, and I listen to their grievances. Therefore, I've decided it is not in the people's interest to sit here watching this one-party process. I'm not going to participate in it. And I'm going to go and do something productive. I'm going to go to South Dakota with many other legislators, governors from around our country to listen to evidentiary reports regarding election discrepancies so I may give the people some answers to address the loss of confidence in our election process. We must regain trust in our elections, and I will do my best to do that for our citizens. I invite my Republican colleagues to do the stand-up, walk out, and not sit in the chamber while our colleagues from across the aisle embarrass themselves in front of the citizens of Virginia. Thank you, Mr. President.
What purpose does the senior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph, rise?
Mr. President, I rise for the point of personal privilege.
Senator, is the floor.
Mr. President, on Thursday's Senate calendar, we passed resolutions recognizing high school golf, volleyball, track and field, football teams, college softball teams, a dance company, numerous anniversaries and retirements, as well as a 100th birthday. I consider all of these deserving. It's the tradition of the Senate to recognize the hard work and dedication that results in these achievements. Our Commonwealth is better for it. On Thursday, we also recognized a hardware store, a police officer, a community services board, a nurse, a community center, again, all deserving. I myself submitted a resolution commending the Virginia Beach Life-Saving Service, whose actions on a difficult day resulted in 75 people being saved at the Virginia Beach oceanfront, all in one day. This made the news. We're lucky to have these dedicated individuals in our community to ensure that Virginia Beach, a major tourist location, maintains its reputation as a safe community for both residents and visitors alike. Like these other resolutions, the Virginia Beach lifeguards deserve to be recognized. However, I was told this resolution would not be included on our calendar, that these dedicated individuals would not be recognized. I was told that these heroes were only doing their job. 12 lifeguards, 6 reliefs, 7 supervisors, working together, had 75 rescues and saved 75 lives. I believe that they did an exceptional job worthy of recognition by the Senate. My question, Mr. President, is how can this accomplishment be different than recognizing a police officer for doing their job, a nurse for doing their job, a community services board for accomplishing its set goals, a community center for providing assistance, a hardware store for serving the community. I believe this is punitive and wrong. I believe I was singled out. I believe this is an abuse of power, and it goes directly against the congeniality, the camaraderie, the spirit of working together, and the respect that defines the Senate of Virginia. Most importantly, it's petty. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. This is not about me. It's not even about my resolution. It's about what's acceptable in the Senate. We have all witnessed the degradation of debate, the tone of our discourse, the lack of transparency, the absence of courtesy. This behavior is beneath the dignity of the Senate. Denying this resolution does not harm me, but it punishes the citizens of Virginia who we're elected to serve. And I'm gravely disappointed in these actions. As members of this body, you should be too. Thank you, Mr. President.
For what purpose does Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. For a point of personal privilege.
Senator, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last time that we were on this floor together considering judicial candidates, I was told that the candidate preferred by our delegation here in the Senate and also strongly supported by the local bar would not be interviewed despite her strong support. And that day, when we actually elected the judge for that vacancy, we were told to vote for that candidate because they were a great Democrat on the floor of the Senate. We were told that's why that was amongst the candidates' qualifications. They were a great Democrat. And so I guess her mistake was focusing on the law, not participating in partisan politics, and that's why she wasn't even granted an interview. On Friday afternoon, we were asked to submit our names of candidates to be interviewed, and we were told that we needed to get them in by Saturday. You know, the very common Friday request for a Saturday deadline to be met. And then today we're told I get to tell the same qualified, distinguished judge that she again will not be interviewed by this body, regardless of her qualifications or support. And we were told in the same breath that it's because the Democratic nominees have already been selected. This chamber has a practice of not casting negative votes on judicial candidates because we do not want to appear that it's a partisan thing, that one side, even though they might have a preference for someone else, they don't actually oppose someone. But to now have it said on this floor that the Democratic nominees have already been selected and they will be the only ones that are interviewed is pretty galling. And I think that it's below this chamber, and I think that we're going in the wrong direction. And I'm very disappointed for what it means for the judiciary, especially in my portion of the Commonwealth.
For what purpose does the Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of personal privilege.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I do think that my colleague from Roanoke County raises a point, and that is these candidates should not be described as the candidates of one party. They should be described as candidates representing the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that to me is that's a misstatement to say they're representing one party. These candidates don't run under a partisan banner. When appellants come in front of them seeking relief, they don't judge those appellants based on partisanship or partisan basis. And if I thought for one moment that that was part of their makeup, I would not vote for them, and I would urge you not to vote for them. We have put together a historic panel of people with various backgrounds, from Roanoke to Tidewater to Northern Virginia, City of Richmond, and we've listened to a lot of people. And I will tell my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I said this both publicly and privately, if you had opinions on candidates, please let us know. Now, it's the custom of this practice that the majority caucus has, frankly, the final say in terms of who gets nominated by the Courts of Justice Committee. That's not something that originated with us. It was that way for the decade before. And we understand that. That's part of democracy, majority rules. But that being the case, we are a collegial body. We accept each other's opinions. I would ask that you take a look at these candidates in the next 24 hours, go to the interviews, ask them the tough questions, and make up your mind whether or not you think they can represent the people of this Commonwealth on the Court of Appeals. Forget about their partisan background. Forget about who's Democratic or who's Republican. That's not what's at issue here. The question is, are these 8 people qualified to sit on the Court of Appeals and judge cases as they come up from the circuit courts? That is the only question. And I hope we can stay focused on that. And again, I would just simply come back to the same point. These are not Democratic nominees. These are nominees for the people of Virginia.
What purpose does the Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Saraville, rise?
Point of personal privilege.
Senator, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I just want to sort of second the comments by my seatmate here and also provide a little bit more color on the process so that we're all clear about who vetted who and what that means. First of all, we requested, actually the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the chairman of the House Courts Committee requested vetting of these candidates, I want to say 3 different times. First, at the beginning of the 2020 session, then again at the beginning of the 2021 session, and then again at the end of the 2021 session. And through those processes, I think it was 82 people ended up asking themselves to be considered. Those names were provided, they were supposed to submit themselves to the Virginia State Bar, not the Virginia Bar Association, the Virginia State Bar, which is a piece of your government. It's in our budget. Those people are then transmitted to DLS so that DLS can do the necessary background checks they need to work, and the various bar associations around the state that like to do vetting, of which there are 8 others, then get those names from the Virginia State Bar, and they're entitled to also vet those people. And they have different submission requirements and different interview requirements, et cetera. Each one operates differently. Those include the Virginia Bar Association, the trial lawyers, the Virginia Association of Defense Attorneys, which is insurance defense, the Virginia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the Virginia Women Attorneys Association, the Old Dominion Bar Association, which represents the African-American legal community, the Hispanic Bar Association, the Asian and Pacific Islander Bar Association, and I might be missing somebody, but all of those organizations then do their vetting. So we ended up getting feedback on most candidates, not all, by either 8 or 9 different bar associations, and they all have different practices. Some provide ratings on you no matter what the rating is. Others only tell you if you make one of their top 2 categories, and if you don't make the top 2, they don't say anything. But every candidate was encouraged to make sure they went through everything. That's the vetting that was done. And we find that by asking for input from all over the Commonwealth and all these associations with all these different perspectives, we tend to get a better outcome, because sometimes the bar association's process can go off the rails. Just for example, the Virginia State Bar process had them actually using 5 separate committees of people to vet the 82. They did one vetting process with one committee in 2020. They did another vetting process with a committee in 2021. And then when they got 50 nominees after that, they set up 3 new committees to vet those people. So it wasn't actually the same people vetting. And so there's, there's a lot of different people vetting in all this. But all that feedback from our perspective helps us get to a better result. And if anybody wants to see the ratings of the bar associations, happy to show them to you. They're also, as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee pointed out, publicly available. I'll also just submit that many of us also find personal meetings and, to a lesser extent, group interviews to be helpful. And in all of those proceedings that I've ever been involved in, I've never heard a single person ask about politics. All I've ever heard of is people asking about people's background, their history, their life story, and legal questions. Never politics. So it's to second what the senator from the city of Fairfax said. That's not an issue here. And from my perspective, the list of 8 nominees are going to be the nominees of the Senate, and it's our understanding that we have an agreement that the House will nominate the same people, and we'll have the same people standing for election, and once they're elected, they will be judges on the Court of Appeals of Virginia. And Mr. President, having said that, I would ask really quickly if the senator from James City County would yield for a quick question. So I assume the answer is yes.
Microphone. Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman. Will Senator yield for a question?
Mr. President, he never looked this good, sir. He doesn't wear he doesn't wear pink. Mr. President, I have to apologize. I missed the eloquence and the articulation of the senator who's asking questions, but you are not old enough, Mr. President, to remember who this guy was, Johnny Carson. He was on late night TV with the great Karnak.
Yes.
And my anticipation that the senator wants to know, will we move with expediency tomorrow? And I have previously told him, and I'm happy to publicly say that I have assured him that at least 11 or 12 of the Republican senators will be physically present tomorrow, and that I have requested them in emphatic terms to proceed to waive.
Mr. President, the gentleman yield for an actual question this time instead of an implied one.
Senator yield.
Mr. President, some of us are more succinct than others.
Mr. President, I would ask the senator from James City County, while we appreciate that all 11 or 12 folks will be here and that there's a desire to move at expediency, that we have also your assurance that that your caucus will either waive reads or suspend the rules or what's necessary for us to complete a judicial election tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. President, my response, I thought, was pretty clear before. It is my expectation that it will be waived. I have asked our caucus to do that. At this point, only one individual has expressed dissent. That doesn't mean that there might be 1 or 2 more, but I will respectfully ask if any of the 11 or 12 who expect to be here tomorrow have a different perspective on that. I would appreciate you immediately notifying the senator upon adjournment so that if they have to make any adaptation in the approach, but it is my intention to try to deliver those 6 or 7 votes that you need, sir.
Mr. President, although I don't turn 50 for another 12 days, I've lost my hearing in this box, and I didn't hear his first answer very clearly, but that answer I heard very clearly, and I appreciate his answer. And I appreciate the accommodation that his caucus is showing to move this process along expediently.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Mr. President, I had pressed my button to make a point of personal privilege, but since the senator from Eastern Fairfax stole my notepad and 99% of my thunder, I'm just going to sit down, which I know will please the senior senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Thank the senator. What purpose is the...
I thank the gentleman.
What purpose is the senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a point of personal privilege.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the senator from Roanoke County for bringing up the hopefully inadvertent reference to our Senate candidates for the Court of Appeals as Democratic candidates, and I thank him for bringing that to our attention. The other thing, Mr. President, is sometimes, we all try to be amusing and try to be funny and say pithy things, but referencing our governor by someone else's name is, I think, disrespectful and inappropriate, and I don't think in keeping with the better traditions of the Senate. Thank you.
What purpose is Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise?
Mr. President, to follow up on some of the comments that were made by the Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Fairfax City, and others, there's never been, to my knowledge, more comprehensive vetting of these potential judges than we have done since January. The Virginia State Bar agreed to extend, but with a separate additional panel, the vetting of all of these judges. There are 82 people who put their names forth. The State Bar, Virginia State Bar, which all lawyers have to be a member of, has vetted everybody, as I understand it, and given recommendations at least to over 40, as I recall, for these individuals. Again, we've never had such a comprehensive and extensive vetting of judges in my knowledge. I don't think ever. And part of it is because we have 8 judges to the Court of Appeals that we need to select. In addition to that, Mr. President, if anybody wants to look at the evaluations, they're welcome to do so. Of course, there's a confidential part the Legislative Services has, but beyond that, these comprehensive vettings by all these different bars, not just the State Bar, which every lawyer has to be a member of, Virginia Bar Association, trial lawyers, the list goes on and on. I don't know how many, about half a dozen or so, if I'm not mistaken. You're welcome to look at what they've said. In addition to that, Mr. President, it's important to note that we have respected the importance of racial, gender, geographic, and practice area diversity. That's extremely important. Practice area diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, and geographic diversity throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, it's not easy to do this. We spent hours and hours doing this work. Many people vetted these people individually. They came to my office, for example, or on Zoom, or on telephone. There are many ways to vet these people, and they've all been vetted extensively. I want to emphasize again, we have not vetted this number of people for judicial openings ever since I can recall, probably ever, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I think we've done it, very proud of what we've done, and it's important to note that the House and the Senate are in accord with the names that I mentioned, and we hope to get this done as quickly as possible. If the if the other side of the aisle will be willing to waive the readings and whatever needs to take place tomorrow, we can get out here maybe tomorrow night. Who knows? But in any event, we're prepared to go forward at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I welcome anybody's welcome to come to the committee room and observe the further vetting of these judges. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the clerk will report any announcements on the desk.
Mr. President.
Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for point of personal privilege.
Senators, the floor.
It's a little delayed in hitting the button to rise and contemplating a little bit about what was said on the floor today, as well as, frankly, since the last election. Some things were said on today that sort of bugged me. I enjoy having debate about issues and debate on real issues across party lines and different things. But one thing I think is a little bit different that's occurred that I think all of us should be concerned about over the last several months, and it's around the last presidential election. And I can't believe we're still talking about it, but the perpetual reinforcement of a lie that somehow multiple states conspired for one party or the other. And what's more disappointing is to see members of this body perpetuate that lie. Here's the hard truth. As an elected official, like it or not, it's incumbent upon your office to sometimes have difficult conversations with constituents that want you to think one way because they see this conspiracy or that conspiracy. But supporting that in this case is undermining our democracy. And what you're doing is eroding fundamentals of the truth that in Virginia we have laws, we have process. I very much recall in 2017 we used that process and decided a House member's vote from picking from a canister, picking a name. We have election law, we have process. But are those in this chamber that continue to perpetuate a lie and a falsehood and false hopes that are frankly irresponsible? They're beneath your office, beneath this body. And it's incumbent upon you, as an elected leader in Virginia, to stop the nonsense and tell the hard truth. Our democracy depends on it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the clerk will report any announcements on the desk.
Tomorrow, Tuesday, August the 9th, the Committee on the Judiciary will meet at 8 a.m., Senate Room A in Pocahontas. The Committee on Rules will meet at 10 a.m. in Senate Room 3 in the Capitol.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Seeing none, call on the Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Senator, the question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.